So here we go. Like mentioned on the introduction, for those who are arriving exactly on the hour. So today is a Thanksgiving in the US. We won't have that many people obviously attending, but we didn't want to also cancel the meeting because there's a lot of other areas than US in the world as well. So we try to keep this as a weekly thing, regardless of all of these holidays across the world, whatever those are happening, except probably the upcoming Christmas holiday is probably, if that's overlapping with any of the weeks, we'll have a break on there. And last week, the whole PMP team was actually in Dublin in the European SharePoint conference, so we were unable to do SharePoint development special interest group because everybody was actually in a plane flying away from Dublin. So slightly awkward situation, but there was nothing we could actually do on that. Well, everybody was on a plane except Patrick, who's still on parental leave. But anyway. So welcome on this one, welcome on this special interest group call around the SharePoint framework and JavaScript development. Let's see how many people are joining, like mentioned. But what we wanted to do today, I didn't actually schedule any community demos on this time. We rather wanted to go through some of the demos which we went through also last week in the European SharePoint conference, because we did do some announcements and some additional details, and we showed some capabilities last week in Dublin. So we wanted to actually get all of those things recorded today and also to be available in the YouTube channel starting tomorrow. And if there's any questions around any of these topics, more than happy to actually answer on those as we move along on today's call. So basically that means that it will be just me talking. So my name is Esa Juvonen. I'm the Senior Program Manager in the SharePoint engineering side. Next time we'll probably have again community demos then queued up. Now, let's actually go through a few slides, which I wanted to go through and also explain individual functionalities, individual topics as we move along on this journey on these upcoming capabilities. Before we go there, if there's anybody who's never been in the SharePoint Framework special interest group, just explaining what this one is all about. So we originally we had only monthly community calls in the SharePoint Patterns and Practices, but quite fast we realized that, well, the monthly community calls are 1 hour calls where we summarize the previous month, and we started running out of time. There was no time for Q&A, there was no time to really have a discussion in our window, and no time to actually show anything additional capabilities. So quite soon we started then started doing these special interest group calls, and we started SharePoint Framework special interest group call already 1.5 years ago. And this is around concentrating on JavaScript development, so concentrating on the PMP.js core JavaScript development, also other JavaScript development techniques, and also on the SharePoint framework. And this is part of the larger SharePoint PMP initiative. Now, if you're interested on things, obviously our documentation, AKMS SP Dev Docs, that's official SharePoint documentation in the docs.microsoft.com. If you have questions, SPPMP community is the great location for ask those questions in the Microsoft Tech community. And obviously all the other social media channels. So like mentioned today, we're not going to actually, once again, we're going to skip the PMP.js core topic, and I do apologize on that, but Patrick Rogers, who's leading on that one, is still on a parental leave, and I don't want to jump on that particular topic until he is back. He's back actually on business starting on next Monday. So there's much more actions coming up on that side and announcements coming up on that side as well. On the SharePoint Framework side, we'll quickly go through some updates on what has happened since the previous special interest group, and then we'll concentrate on those 3 new add-on capabilities which came out or are coming out relatively soon. So I will cover more detail to their status and how they work, and I'll do a live demos for all of those 3 capabilities. Like mentioned in the intro, we did demonstrate these capabilities in the European SharePoint conference last week in Dublin, but unfortunately that keynote and the follow-up session was not recorded. So there's no way for anybody to know what we actually showed. So that is exactly the reason why we wanted to go through all of these things today in this special interest group call. Good. Let's actually, and hopefully we'll have time for the Q&A, depending on how much time I will again ramble on these things. So I tend to use quite a lot of time when I'm only talking by myself, but we'll see how it goes. If you have any questions when I go through all the capabilities, slides, feedback, whatever, please use the IM window. You're able, more than happy to jump on there. I have multiple screens on my setup, so I can see what's actually happening there, as long as there's not too many questions coming up on the same time. Now, before we go to the actual content, if you're interested on participating on the special interest group activities, the easiest way to do that is volunteer to do, for example, a demo on a SharePoint framework solution, which potentially could be shared using the GitHub. And in here, just to pinpoint the opportunity as well, you do not, if you're, for example, building your own product, if you're an ISV or representing an ISV, and you would like to show your product, which is built using a SharePoint framework, that's absolutely fine as well. You don't have to share the code using GitHub channels. Obviously, you can also contribute using the open source channels in a GitHub. But if you are an ISV and you want to just show, hey, this is cool stuff built using the SharePoint framework, we are absolutely interested in that as well. So that could be an interesting opportunity for some of you if you're building that kind of products. If you're using the SPFx in a project, that's also interesting, absolutely, to show how people are using that library, because it's being used more and more by customers and partners. It is a really nice library to simplify JavaScript development on top of SharePoint, and obviously provide feedback. Use our issue list channels and use the IM windows and all of our community channels to give us feedback around what's not working, and rather than criticizing Microsoft and not telling what's wrong, we are trying to fix whatever might be potentially wrong or might not be working. Cool. Let's actually jump into the SharePoint framework topic right away. I have a few slides before we go into those specific 3 scenarios, which we want to go through from a new capability perspective. Just to pinpoint, this probably I will keep this slide on the special interest group topics for months and months from this moment forward. But we are evolving significantly the docs.microsoft.com platform. Right now, all of the old SharePoint PMP guidance and everything else has been already consolidated in here. And the next step is that we'll start updating the existing SharePoint adding model guidance and our scenario and solution design guidance in here. And we are planning to actually do a quite nice setup related on scenario-based guidance, which should help you in the future. As an example, if you're looking into, hey, I need to do custom branding in the modern experiences, what are my limitations? What are my options? What are the scale? How would I do that? So there would be explicitly a one page which is explaining you the options and so on. So really, if you're looking into long-term operations, there's a one page which is explaining long-lasting tasks and how they can be implemented in SharePoint Online. For example, comparing the scenarios in server-side time jobs. And then we're also planning into implementing a completely new series around how to transform add-ins and farm solutions to SharePoint framework and modern experiences. Because already today, you can actually use and you can achieve quite a lot of the typical scenarios in the modern experiences, and it seems to be that people are not quite familiar with this stuff. You're able to have custom widgets, you're able to use custom branding, you're able to do a lot of other stuff in the modern experiences as well. So we are going to invest time on that guidance right after, I'd say, holiday season. So that's when we start actually concentrating on that. I'll come back on that one in a second on the schedules as well. And the one new announcements which we did last week in Dublin, which I noticed earlier today that I haven't actually done a proper announcement that now it's available, but now it's officially available. It's 100% worldwide deployed. There was during last weekend there was a small hiccups related on the ALM API capability. So if you were playing around with this one, we did announce it on last Thursday. Then we did small modifications during weekend, and then it came back on, was it on Monday or Tuesday? So you might have seen those hiccups, but now it's actually up and running, 100% deployed worldwide. So the ALM APIs are now available, so you're able to automatically deploy, upgrade, install, uninstall, whatever is needed, SharePoint add-ins. So both SharePoint hosted add-ins and also provider hosted add-ins, and also SharePoint framework solutions. So you're able to explicitly install these things to any site collection or any site within your tenant. And we'll have a look on that one during today as well. Now, let's actually move into quickly on the roadmap, and then we'll jump into those 3 capabilities and walk through the actual demos on this one. This is just the roadmap slide, which I've been updating as we move along within the special interest groups. And this right now, we have updated the ALM APIs to be on a just shipped site, and you can actually see that we've shipped quite a lot of stuff since end of September already. It is slightly even mind-blowing that it's less than 2 months from Ignite, and we've been shipping quite a lot of stuff even since. Coming soon area, it's always interesting. So the assets included in the package, assets included. Please remember to mute yourself. There we go. So assets included in deployment packages is coming up quite soon. So that's coming up within days rather than weeks. Also, the site-specific app catalog to allow scoped deployment, it's coming within the days rather than weeks. And you'll see announcements in social media and also in the social media site when those capabilities are available. The assets included in deployment packages does require a new version of our Yeoman templates. So there will be 1.4 version released as part of that one. I can't disclose the date exactly right now because it might be that we'll still find something and we need to take a few more days extra to do some testing or adjustments. So that's why we're not actually going to give you an exact date, but it's coming really, really soon. The second thing is site designs with an extensibility point, demonstrated also in Ignite and last week in Dublin. It's going to arrive in preview usage on December 2017. Right now, we are mainly concentrated on documentation side of the story, so making sure that we have the sufficient guidance for you to get started on the site designs and with that extensibility point. More Microsoft Graph support, so essentially scopes will be available for Microsoft Graph Client, and that's going to arrive on preview in December 2017 as well. And then there's a small line on the slide, which I can even barely see. And then early next year, we'll release on preview the Hub sites and Hub APIs and also the Groupify APIs. And that's part of the reason why the full transformation guidance story and step-by-step instructions on how to transform existing classic sites to the modern sites will wait until the early next year, because we want to have the Groupify API available. We did demonstrate this one last week in the monthly community call. So how you can actually Groupify an existing classic theme site and modernize the UI. But we'll have more details and more guidance on all of that process whenever later. Let's put it this way. Good. If there's any questions, feel free to jump in the ION window and any of these topics. But what I'm planning to do, like mentioned, is that I'm going to walk through those 3 different capabilities. So ALM APIs, the site collection scope app catalog, and also the site assets package in a solution. So with the live demos. I'm going to use actually slides which we already have recorded for our webcasts, but that's absolutely fine. So you will see a webcast related on these capabilities as well, where we also talk about slightly in a different format on the capabilities, but I think it's fine it's always, there's no harm for repeating the message so people learn how things are actually working. So ALM APIs. You've probably seen the slide already back in 2 weeks ago if you participated on special interest group, but the whole point of the ALM APIs is that you will have a REST API, PowerShell API, PowerShell commandlets, and CSAM APIs to install add-ins to the app catalog, enable them in the app catalog without going to the UI, install add-ins to explicit site collections, and this is not a tenant scope deployment model. This is actually getting the add-in installed to the site, and also upgrading those add-ins and solutions in the site and uninstalling solutions to the site. Technically, we have few additional, let's say, operations available. So when you're adding an add-in to this app catalog, the tenant scoped app catalog, you still need to kind of, in quotes, enable the add-in or a solution in the app catalog, and that's why we have explicit deploy option. And then there's a retract option, which means that the solution is in the app catalog, but it's not being enabled for anybody to use. And then there's the remove, which essentially means deleting that from the app catalog. Oh, good question from Joel Rogers. When would we be able to see plan for Q2 and forward? At some point, let's see. We'll come back on that one. Good question related on roadmap stuff, but not yet. Whenever we have something to disclose, we'll update the scenarios. Now, this is the ALM APIs, like mentioned. And the key points to understand, this is for both SharePoint Framework solutions and add-ins. So the whole point is that you can automate programmatically the whole deployment scenario. So if you're, let's say, if you're a syndication partner, you're hosting or managing multiple tenants, you can easily automate deployment even to add-ins on SPFx solutions to your customer tenants. There's quite a lot of syndication partners out there. This is a full automation support, so including the trust operation as well. So there's no requirement for anybody to go to the site level and click trust for the add-in. All of that's actually getting automatically done. And this is a real live deployment of the add-in. So all of the, let's say, typical scenarios are supported. So you can use app-only operations. So all of the scenarios, all of the APIs are supported using the app-only access. And also if you're using provider-hosted add-ins, which have associated app installed or app and uninstalled event, all of those are getting properly fired because the add-in is correctly installed to the site. It's not the classic, how would I put it, tenant scope deployment add-in, if you remember what that option was in Office 365. Now, just to cover all of the operations, we do have documentation available in the docs.microsoft.com. We need to still evolve that documentation slightly. It's not in a best possible format, but basically we have a site level operation, or we have a read operations around what add-ins are available, and we have all of these options available in REST API, in PnP CSAM, and PnP PowerShell. So the REST API has been created by SharePoint Engineering, so well, technically me and my team, and then we use the community channels to create a CSAM wrapper for the REST API and also the PnP PowerShell commandlets to automate this in a scripting perspective if needed. So these are for getting details around available apps or details around specific app or SharePoint Framework solution. Then if you are installing or uninstalling or upgrading the solution in the site context, we have specific operations for those as well. And then there's a specific separate context for the solutions and operations which are happening in the app catalog side as well. Now, quick question, just checking from Joel. Assuming that this is not possible, haven't checked. Yes, sorry. Will we be able to use an ALM APIs for Visual Studio Online CI pipeline? That would be awesome. I don't see any reason why you could not be doing that. Absolutely, you can do that. You're able to get the solutions automatically deployed using, for example, the app-only access and then getting stuff installed on the site. Absolutely. Good point and good scenario for the ALM APIs as well. Now let's actually have a live demo on this one. So let me share my screen and somebody needs to tell whenever the screen sharing is successful in the session. So let me share one of my screens. If you go to docs.microsoft.com/SharePoint, you land on this page, then you can decide, are you a SharePoint developer or are you a SharePoint server? And I know it's a bad joke, and I always do that. We're all developers. So in the SharePoint APIs, we have an ALM APIs listed and documented here. This isn't really optimal right now, the documentation. We've been struggling on finding time to get stuff polished, but at least it's telling the endpoints and the URLs and all of that. And it also lists our PnP PowerShell commandlets. And so if you prefer to do this using scripts, you can actually absolutely do that as well. There is a CSAM API available as well, like shown in the slides, but it's not yet listed in here in the documentation. Now let's actually do something with this one. So I'm going to actually open up a site collection. There's my app for SharePoint. We can see that we do not have. So let me repeat that one more time. And let me, this is unbelievable. Okay, there we go. Now we're in the right status. Cool. So let me actually go to the PowerShell side of the story, and I'm going to use now the PowerShell, just for the sake of it, because the PowerShell is super easy to show how the APIs are working and how things are behaving. Now, Irvin, were we supposed to connect to the site, or were we supposed to connect to the app catalog? Just a discussion point for you as well.
Site.
So whenever we are installing something, let's actually go to, we can use this one. This particular site, so it doesn't really matter that much. In this context, I'm going to actually sign into the site collection. So I'm going to do connect PMP online and the URL, and let's actually connect to that site. So I'm going to sign in.
I have to mention that there is a difference if you use the REST APIs directly. If you use the PNP provided CSM APIs or the PowerShell commandlets, you connect to the site because they will figure out where the app catalog is created. So some of the operations you execute through the REST API directly, you execute towards the app catalog site.
Yes. Now all of that is documented in the documentation, and we'll make sure that that's absolutely up to date, so it's not too confusing. Now, in here, I do have a simplistic provider-hosted add-in, and we can actually use that one to play around with the scenario, so we don't run out of time within the 1 hour webcast, because we do have 2 other topics coming up as well. So I can actually now, I can first of all, I can check what are the available add-ins in the catalog. So get the PMP app. And this is actually listing all of the add-ins and add-in details which are available to get it installed onto the site from the app catalog. But in my case, we want to actually add that additional solution, and this is a provider-hosted add-in just for the sake of it. And we want to add that one to the app catalog. It's been like years since I created a SharePoint-hosted add-in, but just to demonstrate the capability. So I can now do add PMP add-in or app, and path being in this case there we go, SP apps SP hosted. This is now then installing that app, the app catalog, and there we go. Now we can actually see that it's available. So now if I do again the get PMP app, we can see that what are the add-ins which are available, and one of these add-ins which is now listed here as a new one is the SP apps SP hosted. So now, because I'm using the PMP PowerShell, which means that I'm in the context of the site, because that's how the PMP PowerShell works. The native SharePoint Online Management Shell works in the way that you're in the context of tenant, but PMP PowerShell works always that you're in the context of the site. I can easily now install this add-in to the site as well. Now, right now, if I remember correctly, and Irvin can actually confirm this easily, we still need to do publish PMP app.
Yes, correct.
Because this is actually the publish PMP app is the operation which is basically the same as you're drag and dropping the SP add-in or SPFx solution to the app catalog, and you need to trust it in a tenant app catalog level. The publish PMP app is exactly the same operation. So this is the tenant level trust operation. Now, in the new versions of PMP PowerShell, you can actually automate those steps automatically. Interesting. So let me quickly do this. There is a small hiccup which we can easily fix doing that step manually. Okay, so let me actually close and do this manually. Install this.
It's manually. Actually already enabled. It was already enabled.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. So, but I'm gonna now do the same thing in here, and basically the publish would be doing exactly the following step. Oh,
it's already done here. It enables by default.
It's SharePoint hosted add-in. That's
works different from an SPFx.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's true. So if it would be a solution, a SharePoint hosted solution, then you actually get this icon which is telling you that, hey, are you trusting this SPFx solution? Sorry for the confusion. It's been a while until I've used a SharePoint hosted add-ins. But this is the SharePoint framework solution. And it would actually, that's when the publish operation has to happen, which basically means same as somebody is clicking this deploy button. And now it's available to be installed. Now, in our case, I'm going to actually get in here. So we're still in the context of the site. So get PnP app. We can see the app which is available. In this case, we wanted to use the SharePoint hosted add-in and install that to the site. So I'm going to actually take that URL, and then we're going to do install PnP app identity and copy that one there. Now, there's one thing to remember around this identity mapping. If I flip here in the app catalog, this is product ID. And it is not actually product ID which we're looking into doing there. We're looking into having the unique GUID of the item in the app catalog, which might be slightly confusing, but you can use always the APIs to figure out what is the URL as well. So now let's actually get that one installed to the site. And install operation happened. Now if I go to the site, if I go to the site contents, we can see that my SharePoint hosted app is getting installed. And like within the normal user driven operation, the installation does take a while. So it can take it can take 20 seconds, it can take 10 seconds, slightly depends when the time job is actually being executed on a site. And hopefully this time it's not super slow, unless we have some other issues in the online as well. Come on, there we go. So there's my SharePoint hosted add-in, and if I want to look on the details, all of this is good to go. The permissions has been approved, permissions has been handled. The trust operation, which would be there for OAuth, is being automatically done using the context where the REST operation or CSOM operation or the PowerShell operation happened. So using that person's permissions. So now if I go to this SharePoint hosted add-ins, this is just a quick shell demonstrating SharePoint hosted add-in, and it's saying that it's an awesome SharePoint hosted app. It's been a while since I've actually used SharePoint hosted apps, but that's a different discussion why you shouldn't be necessarily using them. Good. Now, if we need to then uninstall or upgrade stuff, we can absolutely do that as well. So uninstallation, uninstall PnP app, and we can use the same identity here. Uninstallation happens automatically as well. Maybe a small pinpoint or small note to remember or to know around the uninstallation is that the uninstallation happens in a way that we do not use the recycle bin. So the solution is getting SPFx solution, or the add-in solution is automatically getting fully cleaned and removed from the site. So there's no recycle bin step in here, which, by the way, is which is an awesome thing from a developer perspective as well, because quite often if you're testing deployments to these things to the site, it is quite frustrating to go to the recycle bin and delete from a second stage recycle bin, and that takes time. So using the PnP PowerShell, using the REST APIs, you can fully uninstall the solution from a site extremely easily, which is cool. Good. I think that's around the ALM APIs. Like mentioned, the documentation is already out there. It is listing the REST operations. You have access on the PnP code. You can see the CSOM operations. You can see the PnP PowerShell commands and how they've been implemented. If you want to implement similar stuff by yourself, if you don't want to use those existing implementations. But let's flip quickly back on the slides. Concentrate on the following topic, just selecting the right set of slides. And the following topic was around site collection app catalog. Now, the site collection app catalog was also it was originally explained that it's coming in the Ignite, and then last week in Dublin, we kind of reinforced the message and first time ever demonstrated that properly. And this one is coming within a matter of days rather than weeks. The whole point of the site collection app catalog is that typically by default, in the past, you always had a tenant scoped app catalog. Which meant that whenever you install a solution to the tenant scoped app catalog, those solutions are available across the tenant. So you can't isolate visibility of an add-in only to a specific site collection or set of site collections. Now, using the site-specific app catalog, first of all, the tenant admin can enable that in a subset of site collections or site collections where they want to use that. And then, and it is a tenant level tenant admin operation, so there's still the centralized governance and centralized control. But after that has been done, you're able to then install or set add-ins to be visible only in a subset of site collections. So basically then add the add-in to the site collection scope app catalog, and the add-in is only available within that site. So typical scenarios would be something like the global intranet scenario. We have a one site collection with a global intranet, and then we have 10,000 collaboration sites. You don't want to have same add-ins and SharePoint framework solutions to be visible to be installed on collaboration sites. You can use then the site collection scope app catalog on the behavior. I'll come back on the, well, actually, Arturo's question is really good. Is there a way to deploy an app to all sites, including new sites by default, like the deployment option we had on manual path? Well, I think the deployment option manual path is referring to the tenant scoped deployment option for add-ins, and that's a slightly different scenario because that never actually installed the add-in to the site level. The tenant scope add-in deployment actually meant that you created an instance of the add-in to the app catalog, and then we added a links to the site from a site contents page to the app catalog instance, and that's a different, slightly different scenario. Now, if you need to have the app or SharePoint framework solution installed and available across all of the sites automatically, it again slightly depends on the detailed scenario. If it's an app, you would need to automate adding the app to the site, for example, as part of your provisioning logic. So again, it now depends on how the end users are creating and requesting a new site collection. Do you have a custom UI? Do you have a custom form? Or do you call an admin and request the site collection to be created? If you call an admin, for example, they probably use anyway PowerShell. And then you would just include the step of activating the add-in on those PowerShells. If it's an out-of-the-box UI, you can automate the whole installation of an add-in to the site using, for example, the extensibility points on the out-of-the-box provisioning UI. So there's small dependencies and different options on that. Hub site specific app catalog would be awesome. I do agree on that one. Good point from Chris. We'll need to wait for hub sites to be truly available, and that's a good scenario, an add-on capability which might be there in the future. Good point. Is it possible also remove, hide out-of-the-box app web parts from a specific site? Answer is unfortunately no, from Oliver's point. Especially in the modern experiences, this is not possible. Technically, in a classic experience, you can easily do this by removing the .webpart files from the webpart gallery, because they're just files in there. In the modern experiences, that's not unfortunately possible. So I have a custom provisioning. The problem is that all new sites created by groups. So you are creating, well, yeah, okay. In the future, whenever there is you're able to associate default recipe to be applied whenever a SharePoint modern group is getting created. So it doesn't matter if the group is created using the group UIs in Outlook or group UIs in SharePoint or group UIs in alternative sites. As default recipe would be applied on the group, and that default recipe can then actually contain the extensibility story on applying the needed solutions and add-ins to the site. Right now, that automation extensibility point doesn't exist. It will be available as a preview capability in mid-December. Right now, we're working on the documentation on that. Good. Now, site-specific app catalog, just quickly pinpoints on this one. Why is that actually important? It provides flexibility for enterprises on deployment options. It decentralizes management for add-ins and SPFx applications. So you don't have to call your tenant admin to be able to take something into a use. And you have a scoped deployment option for add-ins and SPFx solution. One thing to notice on this one, I don't want to scare people, but this also means that people need to be aware on what are they actually installing on the site collection scoped app catalog, because there is always a risk behind of all of these customizations. So if we enable the app catalog for every single site collection in a tenant automatically, you'll lose control, and you might have then potential security risks within your tenant. So you lose the control what the whole SharePoint framework is providing for you. So there are, let's say, scenarios to think through, the governance to think through with this option as well. Let's have a quick demo on this one, just walking through. And a good point from David, with great power comes great responsibility. Exactly, and that is a great way of putting that. Now, let me share my desktop, and hopefully sharing the right screen this time. Yes. And let me actually close this one. And I need to get a small confirmation that the site creation is UIs are working. Good question from Joe, by the way, is that if deployed globally to the tenant app catalog, will the app still be available on the site collection with the dedicated app catalog sites? And answer is yes. So in those sites, let's actually create a new site, app site called app catalog SIG. And because the site creation doesn't take that long, hopefully we don't have any challenges. There we go, a few seconds, and there's a new site collection created. So this is a new site collection which is just created, and if we want to deploy a specific solution which is only available within this site collection, we have to enable the site collection scope app catalog. And this is quite simple stuff, actually. So I'm going to use a PowerShell again. So in this case, we can use SPO service. So we're going to actually use connect to the admin UI of this tenant. So I'm going to use a native SharePoint Online PowerShell because this is a native SharePoint Online PowerShell capability. So spsplat admin SharePoint.com. So, and let me sign in. And there we go. So now if I do get SPO tenant, we're able to see that I'm in the context of the admin site. I'm using the SharePoint Online Management Shell. And in the SharePoint Online Management Shell, the new version of this one, which will go live later tomorrow, will have a new PowerShell commandlets. The capability is not yet enabled for you, but it will be enabled in a matter of days. But the PowerShell commandlet will be available for you starting tomorrow. So then after that, you can always check that is it already working? Is it already working? But how it works is that you use add SPO site collection app catalog, pretty self-descriptive commandlet name, and then you put the site where you want to actually enable this capability. So if I take the URL and we want to enable the site collection scope app catalog in that site, we can easily do that. If I refresh here the site contents, we don't see it yet, but if I refresh 1 second or 2 seconds more, we're able to see that the app catalog activation, there we go, we're able to see the apps for SharePoint app catalog being visible. So what basically happened on the background is that we activated a feature, we double checked that the operation requests for activation of the specific feature is coming from the tenant admin. And then we created the apps for SharePoint app catalog for this particular site. This is exactly the same capability as the tenant scoped app catalog, which means that I can now easily do something as follows. So let me show this one in practice. So if I go to PMP, and I think I had a site collection, site, no, that's not the one. Webcast app catalog, there we go. So here's one of the one solution which haven't been yet packaged. So let me actually do that quickly as well. So there's my solution. I want to actually get this one deployed only in that site collection. Let me do called just as ship. So I'm just making sure that it's ready to get packaged. And then we do the actual package solution. package help, package solution, and just ship. We actually create the SharePoint folder gets created on the structure, and we create the SPPKT file, which we can then drag and drop and get installed on the app catalog. So now if I go to my SharePoint folder and solution, I can see the SPPKT file. Let's put that one over there, and there's my app catalog. And now I can actually drag and drop that particular solution to be available in the site collection. Now, in this case, I didn't update the URL, so it's still path to CDN, because I'm just demonstrating that capability works properly. If you're wondering, there's certain things which right now, when we start the journey with site collection code, app catalog does not work. So the tenants code option doesn't work with this one, and the asset packaging does not work with a site collection app catalog. We'll get all of these limitations or things documented properly when the capability is fully available, which is in a matter of days. Now I'm going to click deploy. And that means that within this site collection, this solution is ready to be installed to the site. So if I now go to the site content and click new app getting installed to this site, we can actually see that there's a webcast app catalog client solution available. If I now go to another site, which is, for example, not that site, let's go to another, completely another site. I think, is that a URL? Yes. That's a URL which is available. So now in this site, if we quickly have a look on what's available in add an app functionality, that particular app is not available. So in here, we can also see the 3 applications. So these are the ones which are coming from tenant app catalog. And in this one, we can see 4, because that's the additional one which is coming from the site collection scope app catalog. Good. One more thing to go through. We have 12 minutes. This always happens to me. So let me actually flip back on the slides, a few things on the slides, and then I'll do a live demo on the site assets packaging as well. While we're doing that, flipping between the screens, quickly checking the pictures. Some specialists have switched the app catalog clip to modern, which means that the pop-up won't appear, which means your app won't work. Yeah, I know, Dirk, that story, which is slightly horrible. We sooner or later will luckily the options will be there that you're able to be in the modern all the time. So right now there's capabilities like the app catalog where you need to be in classic to be able to make that library work, which is slightly awkward. Will the site collection app catalog work within assets included in package? Eventually, that is absolutely the intention. Right now, it is not there. It will be there within, say, well, it won't be there today. It will be there. It won't be there immediately when we release the site collection app catalog, but it will be there quite often. Is it possible to install SPFx solution with global deployment option for web parts in the site collection app catalog so the users don't have installed manually? Answer right now is no, unfortunately. But we're looking into getting that one absolutely supported in the following steps. And there will be, whenever the documentation capability will be out, we will mention all of the supported capabilities and the scenarios as well. Do site collection admin get admin rights to the app catalog? Yes, they basically, it is an app catalog in that site collection. So you'll be natively the owner of that one. It's not the app catalog to the tenant app catalog. It is the site collection scoped app catalog. So it's a completely different instance. Good. Quick story around the asset packaging as well. We will have obviously webcasts and videos and all of this stuff more detailed on these things coming as well. But the assets included in deployment packages, this is actually a massive deal. We talked about this one 2 weeks ago as well in the special interest group call. And even in Dublin, it took a while for people to understand that, oh my God, that's actually magnificent. What is it? Well, what it means is that we, by default, include this JavaScript bundle and all of the JavaScript files and assets inside of the SPPKT file. So when you are installing the SPPKT file to the app catalog or taking the SPPKT file into use, by default, we'll extract the JavaScript files inside of the package. And if the CDN Office 365 CDN is enabled, we'll serve the content from Office 365 CDN. If it's not enabled, or Office 365 CDN is not used within the tenant, we'll serve the content natively directly from the app catalog URLs. So you'll lose some performance impact or performance gains, which the CDN would give, but then there's it's not a public CDN, so it's not anonymously accessible to JavaScript file. Content is never anonymously accessible in tenants anyway. But this is actually super great because this means that you don't have to worry about where I'm hosting my JavaScript files. Where am I actually managing my stuff? Is the URL to my CDN correct? How do I do the Azure CDN configuration or whatever Amazon or whatever service CDN configuration in optimal way? You don't have to worry about that. We'll take care of the whole thing for you. And if you go and flip and disable or enable the Office 365 CDN, we actually make and flip the URLs automatically for you. So you don't need to have to worry about the URL setup at all. And that's absolutely brilliant. If you choose, if you don't trust how Microsoft is doing Office 365 CDN and you want to use your Azure CDN, you can still do that. We'll just flip the default option. Well, the default behavior is the Office 365 CDN, but you are able to control this in the manifest files, and I'll show you that in a second. Why is this an awesome thing? So there's no additional asset hosting location needed. We'll take care of all of that for you. Organization in control of solution assets. And that's a really important thing as well. That means that you as a tenant admin or the person who has the permissions to deploy this stuff in App Catalog controls when the JavaScript files are getting updated. So there's no way for somebody go to that, let's say, a random CDN location and update the JavaScript file. You actually control, because the JavaScript files are stored inside of your content, inside of your site collections. And that's actually a great, let's say, additional security measurement as well. And possible to promote the same package through dev, UAT, and a prod. Really big thing. Because this changes the whole ball game. I can actually now do a sample web part, and I can send that to, let's say, Chris Kent using an email and say, hey, Chris, can you have a look on this one? Can you get me a feedback? Or you can do the same package, which is coming out of the Visual Studio Online as a package solution, or from your, let's say, Visual Studio Code. You are able to take exactly the same package, you don't need to worry about URLs, and move it between the dev, UAT environment, and production, if you have multiple tenants or whatever is your setup. And that's a really, really, really big thing. So a real deal breaker. So let's have a look on this one in practice as well. So let me flip to screen sharing. What? I didn't have a slide demo slide. Absolutely, we'll have a look on this. So let me actually share my screen again. And let me start from the Visual Studio Code side. And here's my Visual Studio solution. So let's actually get my console available in Visual Studio. So we're able to do some stuff here as well. So this is just a really plain, I just scaffold the solution. There's nothing special here. If we have a look on the right manifests, which is the one which we need to update by default if we want to host stuff in the CDN, and we were forced to do in the past, you needed to always figure out what is the URL in here. You do not necessarily need to do that anymore. So by default, in the package solution JSON, we have a new attribute which controls are we packaging our assets inside of the SPFx file. And that is this asset, an attribute here, which is called include client assets. And by default, it's true. But you're able to flip that to false if you want to host your stuff by yourself. So that's still an option. But what it means is that we'll take care of the URL handling for you. And let's quickly have a look on this. Oh, people can see what I'm sharing? Okay, good. So cool, just confirming that one. So the include client side assets is true by default. And now if I do carp bundle ship, we're gonna again package the solution, get it ready to go. And then that's just bundling the JavaScript files or transcompiling the TypeScript to JavaScript for all of the process. And we're good to go. And then we'll do carp package solution, and that's the ship, and that will prepare our solution file to be deployed on the tenant. And that generates the file. And let's quickly have a look on this file before we use and test that everything is working properly. So in the SharePoint solution, we have have the SPFx file. And what's great about the solution structure is that you can always extend the debug folder in the solution. And this is exactly what's inside of the SPFx file. If you rename the SPFx file as a zip, you're able to extract, and you'll see and that these are the files which are inside of there as well. The whole point of this one is that you're able to see what's inside of the SPFx file. And one of the things what is now inside here is also the client-side assets. So the bundle and also the language files for the JavaScript. So there's the bundle, and there is actually the language translations. And these are available inside of the package. The other big thing what we do is that we changed how we, let's actually enable word wrapping. How do we define the URL? So if you do not change anything, and if you do not define the URL, the CDN URL, your CDN URL will be SP client-side asset library, which is a tag, it's a label. And it's a label to tell the SharePoint that this is the one, well, for this web part, you should be flipping the URL automatically based on is the CDN enabled or not. So you don't need to worry about is the CDN enabled or not, and what's the URL. We'll take care of all of that for you. And that's a really, really, really great thing. So let's have a look on this one in practice. So I'm going to actually do install that solution from the solution folder, which we just compiled. And let me use a slightly different tenant for the testing, so that all of the capabilities are available. So let's drag and drop the asset packaging in here. And there's the asset packaging. And one of the things noticed here is that the URL client-side solution will get content from the following domains, and it's saying SharePoint Online. Why? Because it depends again on the Office 365 CDN setting with what is the URL, what are we going to use here. So now I'm going to use the tenant scoped option, so I can actually quickly show how the URL is getting rendered automatically, and I'm going to deploy this one directly in the tenant. Now, to be able to use the solution, I will quickly go and double check what is my solution web part name, so I can actually find it in the web part picker. So my web part name is a tenant scoped asset web part. Cool. So let's actually get back in the tenant. That's my Helsinki site. Let's create a page. Let's in the page select the tenant scoped, what was it? Tenant, something related on tenant scoped assets. And there's my web part. So without me doing any hosting, anything, any setups, everything is getting served. And where is it actually getting served? So let's actually have a look on that one as well. In this case, the CDN has been enabled in this tenant. So let's have a look on the URL. And if we have a look on the sources, actually let's filter this in here and do public CDN. So now if I request the URL, we can see that the tenant scoped assets are getting loaded from, how do I zoom in there? No. Or can I actually see that more easily from here? I probably can see that more easily from here. We're able to see that the SIG asset is getting actually loaded from the public CDN automatically. What's interesting around the URL is also, how do I actually show you that URL? Is that it's saying that it's the public CDN sharepointonline.com/contosodemo.sg sharepoint.com/site/app-catalog/client-side assets. So basically now if we would disable the CDN, we would just flip, this URL would be flipping to http contosodemo.sg.sharepoint.com/site/app-catalog/client-side assets. So depending again on your CDN setting, the URL will be coming from the CDN or either directly from the site, and you don't have to worry about changing that URL. Everything is fully automatic based on the SPFx file content, and that's superb, isn't it? Ooh, yay! Should we use the Office 365 CDN or the doclib approach for saving assets? So this Christian's question is good because that's exactly what we're doing here. So we are actually using doclib if the CDN is disabled. If the CDN is enabled, then we're using CDN. And everything is fully automatic. Is CDN better than using a document library in Office 365? Absolutely, because CDN is getting the assets closer to the user. So that's the whole point of the content delivery networks. It will have a performance gain. Now, some people might be saying that the public CDN isn't good because the JavaScript files are again exposed anonymously outside of the tenant, but it's only JavaScript files. It's not the content. On Oliver's question, so the client-side assets CDN origin is set automatically by Microsoft if CDN is enabled. Correct. You do not have to set this manually. All of the URLs are getting automatically updated. So for this particular web part, we're just saying the definition was, like we saw, the definition was SP client-side library, and all of that is getting automatically replaced based on, again, the tenant level settings in the tenant, and that's really supported. I'm unfortunately having a hard time on zooming on that one, but it's saying public CDN automatically. I can see this being useful once we have an ability to put our own solution in the Office store. Am I onto something there, Vesa? I can't confirm or deny anything, but David has a good idea, a good way of thinking on that one as well. Because again, one of the challenges within the store and a marketplace perspective, maybe for customer might be that, hey, if it's a JavaScript file hosted in external CDN, somebody might be able to change the CDN. If, however, the JavaScript file is getting hosted dynamically from the content of the tenant, then customer owns the location. It is part of the content of the tenant. So therefore, the risks of any security challenges around the store handling are less. But the store story is still not quite there yet. We're working on the store story, and that might come in the future. But good way of thinking from David. But really, really, really great capability. And this will be part of the 1.4 release of Yeoman templates, which is coming out relatively soon. Like mentioned when we started the roadmap discussion, it will come out within a matter of days rather than weeks. So quite soon. I can guarantee that we're not going to ship anything on the eve of Thanksgiving or the day after Thanksgiving, because everybody will be shopping something probably in US tomorrow rather than working if there's any potential issues. But I think that's it. We went 3 minutes long from a content perspective. I do apologize on that. Not a massive amount of additional time for Q&A. We went through some of the questions as we moved along on the demos. And we messed up the Skype, kind of messed up some of the schedules as well. But the whole point of this webcast, this special interest group call was around going through those 3 capabilities which we demonstrated last week in the Dublin as well, and get the whole thing recorded. So thank you, Bert, for jumping in on getting stuff recorded. The next special interest group call for SharePoint Framework is on December 7th. And then next week, we'll have the general SharePoint Dev Special Interest Group. We'll probably talk about the provisioning schema, upcoming changes on the provisioning schema, and a few other things next week. But if you're interested only on SharePoint Framework stuff, that's on 2 weeks notice. Quick question, can you say something to the scopes from the more MS Graph support on the preview for DEC beta endpoints? So this is a good question from Ralph. So what will happen on as part of the next step on the Graph side is that we'll actually give you all the scopes what you want, but it's going to be a tenant administrator granting those scopes. The whole system works in a way, and we talked about this one in Ignite session as well. We will give you a SharePoint application object, which basically is the object and application in the Azure AD, which is behind of the Graph client. And then the tenant administrator is able to add additional scopes for that object or that application. So technically, if your tenant administrator approves, you can add whatever scopes to the Graph client as you wish. But it really comes down again on the fact that there's a tenant administrative operation for adding those scopes in. So you as a developer, you can't do that. And this is required so that there is a tenant level control and tenant admin level control on getting additional access. So if you're good friends with your, let's say, tenant administrator, and they trust you and they trust your code and there's a proper governance, you can get whatever you want for the Graph, which is great. And that's really the way it will be implemented. The preview will be available in mid-December, and then we'll move forward from there and get the feedback in. So really nice for the admins not to care about that. Yes, but I really am super stoked about that capability as well, and super excited because it will unblock all of the craft scenarios. But the key point being on the fact that the tenant administrator has to approve those additional scopes. So we, as a Microsoft, we cannot actually allow additional scopes. There will be default scopes, and that's it. But we'll make the option of granting additional scopes for the craft client. Cool. I think that's it for this one. So hopefully interesting stuff. We'll keep on the video recording. Thank you, Bert, for saving the recording. We'll get the recording on the YouTube channel tomorrow if somebody needs to see this again. And feel free to ping us in social media and other channels to ask additional questions. What is coming? ALM API is already out. Site collection scope app catalog coming pretty soon. Site asset packaging coming really soon as well, with the Yeoman template version 1.4. For US people, enjoy your Thanksgiving and have a relaxing weekend. And for European and Asian people who are not who are working tomorrow, let's get back to work and have fun with the SharePoint development. But thank you everybody who are joining. Sorry for slightly going late on the call. It doesn't usually happen, but I do apologize to Skype issues. Thank you, everybody, and we'll be absolutely in touch. Bye-bye.